Get started. Thank y'all. Thank you all for coming out. I just have a couple of announcements before we begin. First, if I haven't met you yet, my name's Mary Burkell. I'm the council administrator. I know it's a little odd. I have a mic on, but there's a purpose, and that's what I'm about to tell you. We are recording this session, so we will need to use the mic. So when we get to the part, if there's any questions, just hold your questions till we can come over with the mic to make sure we get all the questions and answers at the same time. And I'm going to turn it over to Alex and Evelyn.
Thank you so much, Mary. And I don't know if Joe or Arthur, if y'all want to speak before we start, just to kind of give some background about why we're here, or if you want me to, I can.
I think you should.
Okay. Okay, so just a little bit of background. My name is Alex Carter. I'm here with Evelyn Campo. We represent Desireline, the consultant team that worked on the coastal resilience study. I just recently was informed that instead of using the word resilience, we should use the word resistance because it's more strong. But the idea is that we should be more proactive in developing areas that are susceptible to risk. And there were concerns about the areas between Mandeville and Slidell with a focus on Bayou Liberty, about future development, exacerbating flood risk for current and future residents. And so we looked at the study area beginning in September of 2024. It was over a year and a couple months ago. We started this work. It initially started with Arthur's district, District 11. And then it was expanded to include District 7, which is Joe's district. And it was really because the conditions across the study area are kind of similar. It's very low and flat, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And so we had multiple community meetings. Recently, the study has been kind of approved in multiple phases, and so today is really about working with the builders to kind of bring y'all up to speed as much as we can, answer your questions, facilitate any discussion about specific sites. And so this is the study area, right? So every community meeting that we had this sort of where is my house? We had folks put pins on where they lived, and throughout the process we had pins everywhere. But it includes District 7 and 11. Y'all can see here the dotted line covers the whole area. There we go. And so the goals were really fourfold. One of them was to respond to moratoriums that are present, that are still present, to support land development that's resilient to flooding, right? Account for current infrastructure constraints. A lot of the folks that build here or that live here know that it was originally developed with rural development patterns, so like very slim or narrow lanes, deep ditches, kind of short turning radiuses, and like residents that live there now struggle with the infrastructure that's there, and they're concerned about more infrastructure, and they would rather see their things updated than new things come online that require more maintenance. Addressing concerns about high density developments outpacing that infrastructure, so that gets at that, and really building from the UDC or the Unified Development Code update to support implementation of the 2040 comprehensive plan. This just looks at the different meetings that we had. And so you can kind of see how it started with Bayou Liberty. That was our first meeting at that time. It was just District 11. And so we went to their association meeting, and then it got expanded to District 7. So then we went to the District 7's meeting. And then we had the Bayou Liberty Community Picnic, which is a lot of their local folks go to that every year. And we started updating the council back in, again, September of 24 was our first presentation to the council. We really wanted to preview what we were seeing, the purpose of the study, what the goals were, what we were hearing, and the different tools that could be used to support long-term development in this area. And so then we had an open house meeting at the Towers building. It was actually during the presidential election. So there was a ton of people voting that night that actually came upstairs and also participated in the open house meeting. We presented at the Levee Drainage and Conservation District Board meeting, another District 11 community meeting, and then we started bringing this to public hearings. We had a presentation at the Planning Commission meeting for introduction. It's important to know we didn't just turn it in. We had a long discussion and reviewed all the recommendations. We went over the presentation. We got a lot of feedback. We actually met with Planning Commission members after that meeting to tweak recommendations based on their feedback. And then we had another discussion and action at the Planning Commission meeting in February. The report that's online is this report, right? So that's the most comprehensive assessment, and it's all the recommendations that cover the whole study area were developed and recommended for approval unanimously by the Planning Commission back in February. And then we had, right after that happened, we sort of were moving into introduction, and that's when the home builders and y'all started asking questions. And so I just want to make it clear that there's no intent to sort of exclude any stakeholder group. A lot of this outreach and engagement was just to the community, right? It was anyone could have shown up, anyone could have participated. We really, we weren't targeting just homeowners and people who lived in the study area. It was broadly advertised on the parish's website and then also at all the council meetings. And so just to kind of keep us rolling, we met with y'all in March. That was when the study area was kind of split in the May meeting. We actually presented the study and its recommendations. So this is a big poster board that covers the study area and the timeline and the recommendations and the findings at State of the Coast. That was back in May, and it was kind of happening right around the time it was getting approved. So there's lots of, I think, attention both at the state level, local level, and at the very, very neighborhood level with the study. And then we had the Association of Floodplain Managers. We also presented the study there. So it was another national state conference in May. And then we started meeting more one-on-one with y'all back in July in response to requests for individual meetings. The thing about the study, and I think this has been on a lot of boards, right, is that when you look at this area, 38% or 1,900 acres are wetlands, right, providing critical floodplain protection. And I think one of the questions at one of our meetings was like, how does this relate to the wetland study that's ongoing? We actually finished our work before they finished their work, and they really overlapped. The findings were consistent. So we didn't do the study on the wetlands, so yeah.
That's per Fish and Wildlife Services. That's
right.
per their wetlands data.
But excuse me.
Yeah.
Isn't the Corps of Engineers,
If you happen to be on the mic, we're recording.
Oh, yeah. We can bring them up.
Yeah, here.
Sorry, I'm forgetting. Alex, if you want to stand at this one, this one's on too, and I'll bring this one to y'all.
So when it comes to wetlands, the Corps of Engineers has jurisdiction over wetlands. And just because land is in the floodplain doesn't mean it's wetlands by definition. So Fish and Wildlife, they are one of the agencies that comment on the Corps' 404 permits, but they have no jurisdiction over wetlands.
Yeah, I don't think we're commenting on the jurisdictional authority of the wetlands or how they're established. It's just that we're looking at data sets that are available, one of which is the Wildlife and Fisheries Wetlands data set.
No, I'm just concerned that, so in order to determine whether it's wetlands or not, you need a delineation by a biologist. Soils, wetland vegetation, and inundation during the growing season. Okay, so I'm just saying, to make a blanket statement that 38% or 19,000 acres are wetlands, I want to know how you validate that.
So that is not our decision to call it that number. That is per the United States Official Wetlands Mapper, which is how you start the process to do jurisdictional wetland determination. There is a difference between a jurisdictional wetland and a place that functions as a wetland but doesn't have that jurisdictional determination. For the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, who is the keeper of that record, we use their map and their data.
And with the new decision that just came out with Congress, how does that apply to non-jurisdictional versus jurisdictional? It's hard to give an exact definition of wetlands when Congress can't even give an exact definition of wetlands.
It's not that hard, honestly. So we change our data when the country puts out its data sets. We go by the data sets that are federally approved and accepted. We don't get into the litigation with jurisdictional wetlands. No one's claiming that this 38% is jurisdictional wetland.
Okay.
You'll notice.
So this could be non-jurisdictional and jurisdictional. It could also be high pine savanna or lowlands. It just, there's no real clarification. It's just you're calling it wetlands as a blanket statement.
There's plenty of maps available with that clarification. This is one sentence, but we are using the
This is
same
oversimplifying it, is what you're
as-
saying.
If you want to imply that, you can imply
Okay.
that.
All right.
That's not what we're saying.
Okay.
So this is like this. If any of y'all have looked at the study, the full report has the maps, it has the sources, it shows the delineations and the variations in this. I think the key here is when we present this information to the public, they're not going to understand all of this, right? We have to give it in a summary, and so you can say it's oversimplified. We're going to say it's a summary. Like these are the key findings that helped us determine what the right approach was and what our recommendations are. And so, we can debate, that number, but ultimately, like Evelyn is saying, it's from a national data set and it's reflecting that data and it's a hard number.
I do want to make sure, sorry, I see some members of the council with questions. Let's allow y'all to jump in.
When we talked at the previous meeting, the chart, the presentation I'm referring to is the one that's phase 3 of the study being done by planning and development. Wetlands in St. Tammany, decisions for, let's say, mapping for decision making. So this is in process right now. It's in phase 3. Erin may be able to add some more about it. I don't want to put her on the spot, but I've sat through a couple meetings talking about this, and that's what I was asking about, was how did this weigh into that? Because I saw you look at me when you mentioned that. This is exactly what I was talking about. And then the other thing I mentioned was the additional LiDAR data that's recently available through the mosquito abatement, which I also turned these people on to, so they knew that they could have more accurate mapping of St. Tammany Parish on some very recent LiDAR data.
Those are great questions. I'm inviting Erin to speak on that if she wants to. I know Ross in the past has answered that question at former meetings, and I don't want to paraphrase what he said, but they are two different studies.
When we talked about that, and when I brought that, this is what I was referring to.
Yeah, no, it's a good question.
Is there a particular question though?
No, just they were talking about they were talking about the definition of wetlands, and it went to wildlife and fisheries. And when I brought this up as an additional data set, it was not related to wildlife and fisheries. It was related to a current study that's in its final throes. And I just wanted, maybe you could give people, the only question would be is, what's the date that data is going to be available, Erin? You might be able to talk about
I'm
how
not
that's
quite
going to
sure.
Okay, well,
Yeah, I don't know.
I know they've got, I do know I can help then. August and September, August is almost over. I think it'll be more September, October. They're going to have some public meetings, opportunities for the public to get engaged, understand what that is. But it was characterized to me as a very, very accurate mapping of where there's water in St. Tammany Parish.
Sure.
If I could just add one thing. So when we were going through the UDC code, and I believe Aaron and Ted were there, the issue of wetlands came up and whether the parish should be enforcing wetlands, whatever. And the decision was made, correct me if I'm wrong, that that's the federal government's jurisdiction, not the parish's, to enforce. So I just wanted to make that clear. And I think we struck that out of the UDC, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Bruce, I don't think this is more of an awareness to say where are the high spots, and with very, 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 very precise data. I don't think, I've heard you guys, the conversation about jurisdictional and non-jurisdictional. I'm not playing in that game. I'm just telling you there's another data set that's coming out from, that's going to provide specific information about what's considered wet in St. Tammany. I'm happy to share with what I've got, Bruce, and show you my reports.
No, I hear you. I've actually been trying to get a hold of Ross for 2 weeks now to ask him about that study.
You're welcome to borrow mine or make a copy.
I would love a copy.
My comments are that I think there's some confusion in the use of the word wetlands, because it means one thing to the general public, and it puts them on alarm, and it means another thing to developers. And I'm not even sure that that's the right term that Wildlife and Fisheries uses in referring to these areas. So I would suggest that you don't use the word wetlands, because that has different meanings to different people. If you're trying, all of this is technical stuff. Wetlands, I think you need to stay away from it, and you can use other words to describe what you're looking at. I think it's a slippery slope, and it would give everybody some clarity, even if you want to explain it. But just using the word wetlands, to most people that hear it, they say, well, then that will never be built on. It's the end of the game.
So, we're summarizing, but in the report, it refers to and has a map of the wetlands in the study area that are sourced from Wildlife and Fisheries. So if you look to the report and you're referring to that and you understand that this is a summary, I think the key is we are being specific in where these areas are. They're the green areas on the map. This is how Wildlife and Fisheries labels those areas. The source is linked in the report, so if you have questions about where the source data is coming from and you want to understand how it's compiled, it's a national data set that you can go and look into. And I think I understand where y'all are coming from, but I want to make sure you understand that this is just one factor that went into considering this, right? So if we could continue, our goal is not to be vague, it's not to confuse people. Like, we often summarize things, and maybe I would suggest, again, if we could print them all copies of the report, because every finding has maps that goes with it that shows exactly the location for what we're talking about, because this is all about where these things manifest in the built environment, and that's what's driving the recommendations of the resilience overlay.
Yes, I know some people refer to like the National Wetland Inventory because it's a really nice, easy GIS map, and but if you ever look at that relative to a professional mapping, it hardly ever matches. So I think that's just a caveat to, I mean, in areas, yes, it does match, but the rules change. I mean, to Paul's point, I mean, the rules change all the time. And so in Louisiana, we found the National Wetland Inventory highly inaccurate.
I appreciate that input. I think ultimately it's the best available data that was there when we were working on the study, and if it aligns with the findings that are in development with the Parish's wetland study, I think, so far so good. There hasn't been anything that's indicating that this data is incorrect. And so if there is, and look, we've been saying this, if there's something about an area that y'all want us to look at again, like, we can reanalyze it. If there's some discrepancy in a national data set and you have more localized information or engineering data, we're asking for that. We're more than happy to take a look at it. But the generalization, I think, is coming from sort of both sides, right? Like, we have a map, it's specific, it's green, it's either green or white. It's either one of the wetlands that's going towards that 38% or it's not. And so if y'all are okay, we'll keep going. Yeah? Okay, cool. The other part of this is a general statement, but again, backed up by more support. And I don't know if this is going to be helpful, but I think that the idea behind this slide is really just to summarize at a high level what we're seeing. And so you've got coastal and riverine flooding. This is where you have this confluence of the high lake or with a high tide or a wind event, and then you've got water flowing through the study area from the north. There's lots of rivers, and so being able to predict and manage water flow in the area is complicated, and it makes engineering more difficult, right, in terms of understanding the cumulative impact on development in the area, not just to new development, but to existing residents. And you couple that with the aging infrastructure and the need to update infrastructure, it becomes more complicated, because just one failed culvert can make a difference in an area flooding or not. 57% of the area is in a FEMA flood zone, and approximately 1/3 of the properties that flood repeatedly are in the study area, which is a lot, And so we also see drainage capacity. So this is, again, kind of what we were talking about. Development and zoning, over 60% of the study area is zoned residential. At the time we were writing this, there were 18 large undeveloped parcels, leading to the potential of future high-density development. This is something that, if you're familiar with the neighbors and the people who live there, this is one of the main reasons why the study was called. We're not saying this is new information. This was information that we were asked to validate, right? Is this true? Is there a large potential? And we looked at it and did the parcel analysis.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
With these percentages, have y'all been able to differentiate between Area 1 and Area 2? Because 38% is in 57 and 60. It's a little misleading, because most of your wetlands, if you look at your map, are in the coastal area, right? Most of your high flood risk area are along the coastal areas. So your percentages should be based on Resiliency Area 1 and Resiliency Area 2.
If I could, I don't know that asking a ton of questions on one slide is necessarily the most productive way to go through this slide deck. We're happy to answer those questions. We have numbers on all this stuff. It's in GIS.
Can you
It's not
tell
hard
us?
to get.
Can you tell us?
If you watch the slides, you'll see
understand.
all of the
Right. So
numbers.
the issue is that. So like,
Trying to tell you the
yeah, the answer is coming, right? So this is leading to the recommendations. I just want y'all to know that not one of these factors.
But you're not listening. That's the problem.
I think we are listening, but
When you ask a question, I don't think you should be rude. I would love an answer. You shouldn't worry about this slide.
We have an answer that is forthcoming.
it's coming. Here,
Below 190 or above
we
190?
can hear you.
That's his question.
All of these numbers are for the study area,
So that's one answer.
which is on this slide.
It is a big
That's
area.
what those numbers are for. This is all in GIS. You can slice and dice it, but that's what it is.
You're attributing all of these numbers that are driven by the bottom to the top.
Respectfully, is there another presentation that needs to be given before
Okay.
we go through this?
So here's the
Like,
thing.
what?
So if you read the report, every one of these findings has a map and it shows where the areas are. So we're not trying to mislead people into thinking that this risk is all in the top or all on the side or all on the left. We show the maps and there is a lot of coastal risk, right? A lot of the flood areas, y'all are right. The flood, those flood zones, a lot of them are in the southern part, but they're also all along and up in the riverine areas, right? So there are a lot of river systems in this area. There's a lot of tributaries. Should just keep in mind it's a comprehensive look at the whole study area. When we did this, we didn't know we were going to be recommending 2 resilient zones. So you got to start looking at the whole pizza at once, right? We didn't slice anything up. This is overall the whole study area. And we weren't thinking about what areas were in Res 1 and Res 2 because we didn't know that was what we were going to be doing, right? So this is more about, and each one of these things has a map that goes with it. So it shows where everything is. Yeah.
Thank you, Alex.
Understand.
So, all right. I think that,
Answer to my questions from the last meeting.
Guys, you have to be mic'd if you're gonna speak.
all right. Thank you all, council members. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for having this meeting. You guys know, I think the frustration that I'm hearing is that, so right now, the Res 1 has been adopted and approved. Res 2 in District 11 has been adopted and approved. I think what from this, I'm facilitating this meeting, but from this side, we thought we were going to focus on District 7 Res 2. It would be helpful that these numbers, which while they are for the total study area, they're building the case and they're making the argument for why the overlay is needed. So it does play into the fact that if we had it broken down by Res 1, Res 2, and even by district, I think that would be helpful for everybody here, and I think that would be helpful for you all as decision makers to understand the difference, because I do think a lot of the numbers in the overwhelming percentages that are here are probably being driven by the southern area. I don't think that, so if you can provide that to this group, I think that go a long way for them to be placated.
Yeah, so it's important to know that we analyze, as planners, we analyze everything comprehensively, and then we look for solutions that are appropriate based on that analysis. The Res 1 and the Res 2, in their fundamental nature, are different because the flood risk profiles are different. So what y'all are saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the flood risk profile on the south end is different than the flood risk profile on the north side. That's why you have 2 res districts. But
Tell me something that
so like, okay, let us, but it's the case that's being made is that these numbers are kind of being arbitrarily thrown about, and they're not. Like, we're using them, we're looking at the spatial distribution of everything, and the recommendations reflect those different flood risk profiles appropriately. So if you don't mind, let's keep going, because you're gonna see more of that decision making as part of this. And so y'all know this, y'all know what we've heard. We're gonna speed this up. Let's keep going, Evelyn. because I don't want to waste your time. This is the existing zoning before the underlying zoning
Would you
district
like-
maps.
Part of the questions that I'm hearing, I just want to make sure that we supplement with one thing that we should all share an understanding of. A land use study, which is what this is not called with a recommendation in mind, okay? I just want to make sure everybody understands that. You don't say we want Res 1 and Res 2, therefore we're going to do this land use study. That's not how this worked at all. This land use study was called to study the area, and like Alex is saying, come up with solutions. So it's not a situation where you're working backwards. I
Right,
just
we're
want
not
to make
building
sure
an
that we all
argument for
understand that
something.
that's
Yeah.
what a land use study is.
Perfect. I don't have the clicker. Okay, perfect.
Can I just say something to that?
So I take issue with that. I went back and watched the council meeting this morning. And Alex, you made the statement in that council meeting that the study supports the leadership's decision-making. So what that tells me is y'all, was this an arbitrary study, or was this leadership guiding you to the results that you're to your findings? You made that statement.
I'll make it again. So like any study is meant to guide leadership's decision making. So we present all the facts. We make recommendations so that leaders can make decisions about whether they agree or don't agree with the study's findings. So it's really important to know, like, every study is done to guide leadership's decision making. I don't know why you would make a study and then not use it to support decision making. And so I totally stand by that statement. It's a genuine motivation is to help leadership have facts and information in front of them so they can make as well-informed a decision as they can about these very challenging problems and issues in the study area. And
Would any members of the council care to weigh in on
Let me weigh in on
the
one thing.
question? Yeah.
I'll tell you what I would love, respectfully, in just the interest of everyone's time, could you write questions down, we get through the presentation, and then ask after? I just think that would make the meeting go faster and be a lot more efficient.
Okay.
I think we understand the study, Joe.
We just want our questions. That's right.
Okay. We're going to go
But I don't know
quickly.
that everybody does, including maybe some of the council
Yes.
members, some
I'm
of the
here to
staff.
hear.
So I think it'd be great if we get through it
Yeah, let's
quickly,
get on the same page.
write the questions down and we get through it. And then we answer the questions.
Some of us have not seen it, and I would like to hear it all, and then I will know what questions I want to ask.
Awesome. Thank y'all. I appreciate that. So, so this is the existing conditions of the study area when it was originally being studied. So the base zoning districts have been changed, but you can see all the residential potential for development. So like while y'all are aware, there's this coastal. That's a lot of potential development in the coastal area. There's actually residential in the middle of the coastal area. And so there's a need for some intervention about lowering densities, updating the base zoning districts, especially with the light yellow areas that are the highest intensity district, the L1. All right, Ev? This shows the future land use map, which is consistent with that finding. So all of the blue areas and green areas are conservation and protected or coastal conservation, and you can see where they fall. They're not just in coastal areas. They follow those river and tributary areas that are flood prone or within the floodways or near the floodways or in and around wetlands areas. This is a topographic map. It's important to see that that red area is flat, right? Super, super flat. It's all the same, for the most part, the same level. The white areas are higher. The green areas are lower. And when we look at this, we just need to think about how moving a little bit of dirt or bringing in a little bit of dirt. This white area, kind of an example, that's like a Lomar, all these little teeny bitty white areas are where people are bringing in fill, lifting up the floodplain, taking themselves out of the floodplain, lowering their insurance premiums. And look, we don't have any problems with that, except for when it has the potential to flood their neighbors. And that is a high potential when you've got rivers draining to the lake, you have the lake that's high, and you have aging infrastructure in the area. So the whole idea is it is a very sensitive area to build in, okay? So there's lots of tools that we looked at. Like Evelyn said, we didn't come in with a solution. We looked at the base zoning and we determined that there was a way to lower the densities to lower the risk. We looked at the critical drainage areas of special concern, did a lot of work on these just to see if there was some way to leverage them. And then the resilience overlay zones were ultimately what we looked at, and this can be applied to lots and buildings where they're mapped. They're not required to be tied to a specific flood map or a drainage study, and it can be applied by lot and basis. And I think that's important. Keep in mind that these others, they're administered by engineering and they're adopted by council. Okay. So there were lots of different tools. These are the districts that we're leveraging, right, and the different kind of tools that we're looking at. I think we can keep going because I keep saying the same things, and I know y'all have questions. We made some minor changes to the future land use map, which were adopted by the Planning Commission. We looked at reducing density. We were really clear about where we were looking at reducing density. These were parts of our meetings back in January and February. These were the original updated land use amendments. We'll keep going. This was the proposed zoning map. It's a lot of proposed changes from those L1s to estate, right? So we're looking at much larger lots in a lot of these areas. And this is really to limit redevelopment, not put more strain on new infrastructure, and protect existing residents and uses until infrastructure is updated. It's important to know that as things are improved and infrastructure is, updated and made to handle more, you can update the zoning, right? So the zoning right now is kind of reflecting more of the existing situation. Okay. And then you can see where the proposed overlays, this was back in February, so some of this is adopted now, but you can see that they are south of 190. The 1 is the highest risk, and the overlay 2 is the moderate risk. And you can see in overlay 1, there's no net fill, right? So the blue area, piers and or piling foundations are required, 3 foot of freeboard, limits on storage. This is consistent with getting CRS points, which was a goal of this too, is to try to lower everybody's insurance premiums if we can. The overlay 2, it's important to note, it's limited fill. You can have fill, right? It's just limited to the building footprint and 6 inches above the natural grade. 3 feet of freeboard, and then you can have some encapsulated fill up to 3 feet above grade. So it's important to note these are different things, right? So I just want to make sure we're not conflating, what does no net fill mean? What does fill mean? What fill can you use? There is the ability to use fill in the Res 2. And it's not the whole area, right? You can see areas that are taken out. Okay, I just kind of went over this so we can keep going. All right, so how do we determine these areas? This was it's very arduous, and we look at every lot, and so we look at the special flood hazard area, the presence of wetlands, areas where repetitive loss structures are clustered, including areas outside the special flood hazard area, and coastal flood risk areas based on CPRA's future inundation maps. Okay.
It's the same thing.
Same thing.
Spelled out.
I don't need the words, but if you need the words, go right ahead. This is really good just as source material if anybody's interested in asking questions. One of the things that we got a lot of questions from the residents when we were doing community meetings was, what does this mean if we already live in the area? And so, if you're already living there, existing lots can still be developed as approved, right? If you demolish your home, you can still rebuild it. But you'll be subject to the setbacks of the new zoning district. New zoning district setbacks will apply to additions and new construction and sheds. Some lots will become substandard if they're subdivided. If they're re-subdivided, the lot must become larger. And then existing homes can be sold, right? This isn't gonna prevent anybody from selling their house. Sorry, I'm reading the proposed zoning one, but for the res overlays, it's important to know, and y'all know this, right? The future residents have more resilient housing options. There's no impact to existing dwellings being renovated. New construction has to be raised 3 feet, and then new construction in the res 1 needs pier or piling foundations. Do you want to go over this one, Evelyn? This is a new slide.
Sure. This is just information. I know we had some back and forth in communication about what is a repetitive loss, what is a severe repetitive loss. So I just wanted to have this available for anyone who needed that definition. This is the FEMA definition. Repetitive loss means a structure that has had at least 2 paid flood losses of more than $1,000 in any 10-year period since 1978. Severe repetitive loss is a category within repetitive loss in which the house has flooded either 4 separate times, with each claim exceeding $5,000, with the cumulative of $20,000 or more, or at least 2 separate claims with a cumulative amount exceeding the fair market value of the insured building on the day before each loss. This is a data source that we use. It is a federal data source from NFIP that comes directly from flood insurance claims, not homeowners insurance claims. They are different programs. And this is data that is privacy protected. So we are allowed to, at the parish level, have the information about rep loss sites and areas. The parish is not allowed to distribute that information on an address basis to the public.
Ooh, fun.
This is that breakdown I think you guys were asking about the different sizes of some of the mapped information. So this was made specifically for questions about District 11, right? So District 11, that at the time that these questions were asked was already zoned Res 1, so this was between the passage of Res 1 and Res 2. You can see the numeric breakdown there of the area. And I would just call attention to, in these maps, you're seeing, like for example, that purple shape up toward the north, there are white shapes kind of intermixed in between. That's because the res overlays are proposed on a parcel by parcel basis. They're not proposed wholesale within the boundaries of the study. Because they only align to certain parcels that meet those requirements, the 4 factors that we just talked about.
Yeah, so if it's white, it's not in it. It's not in the overlay.
Oh, that's what we've got.
Okay. Question?
I'll keep this up in case y'all want to look at that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, I'd like to address the council first.
Here, Bruce.
I'll go to the podium.
Sounds right.
So let me tell you where the frustration is. And unfortunately, I'm not sure it's the consultants where the frustration is. When we were led to believe when the UDC rewrite was adopted that these moratoriums would go away, that the UDC would govern land use in this parish, and now what has happened? The moratoriums haven't gone away, and now we're adding another layer of bureaucracy, okay? So I think that's part of the frustration. The second part is, and while I don't have land in this area, my concern is where does it stop? We've had a resiliency study in Arthur's district, in Joe's district. Now I'm hearing Pat wants one, and Martha mentioned it. So, you know, where are we going with this? I'd also like to address some comments that were made at the council meeting. The statement was made that, and I'm addressing the letter from the North Shore, from the home builders, and the North Shore Business Council also sent a letter. Builders are professionals. The Business Council is made up of engineers who helped write our letter. To say that we're making erroneous, and I quote, erroneous accusations, we're purposely misleading, we're obstructionist. I have to take issue with that. Let me tell you, we're members of this community as well, and we spend a lot of time. Let me tell you, if we adopted the UDC without our involvement, it would have been, I mean, I can't tell you how many hours we met to make changes. There were things in there that didn't consider our soil types, that increased cost, et cetera. So here we are today talking about these overlays. So what are the issues? Well, in my opinion, if it's not in the flood zone, if it's not in a critical drainage area, if it's not in, what's my third one? Wetlands, which can be permitted, by the way, then then it shouldn't even be considered in this resiliency, these overlays. So where, first of all, the personal attacks from the consultants, I take issue with that. And you said it. I went back and looked at the meeting and made notes. I mean, we're professionals too. We're professionals too. So this was, I believe this study came out in May, if I heard her statements correctly. And here we are pushing it through in August, okay? It just seems like it deserves more discussion. And then, when I just said, we've already heard this, and here we are, y'all are here today getting educated on this. I question whether the council voted on something that they really didn't know what they were voting on. And I don't mean any disrespect, but I just heard it. And so I would ask that more consideration go into this before we just blanketly devalue a lot of this property. I heard that it's going to increase values. Well, to suggest, we had builders say it's going to cost more money. Am I correct? Yes. And to say, Alex is not a builder. So who makes that decision? The builder or the consultant? I'm a developer. I know that to develop property and to do all raised homes, we're doing a housing study. You want affordable housing? I don't know why you're wasting your money on the study. I really don't. The cost of construction has continually increased. Insurance, supply chain, inflation. So to keep adding layers of bureaucracy and to land is, I think you have to take that into consideration in your future decision making. Thank you.
I have a couple questions.
She's got some.
No, go ahead.
Hi. So I know when we met, it was first meeting I was invited to was towards the end of July, and we said like in 2 weeks, let's actually pick a case study and let's run through it. I'm like, fantastic, because there was very specific things I'm like, I don't know how you apply this to a master plan development. And then the council meeting happened before we were able to do that exercise. And I don't know if this is the proper, because I mean, I guess to Bruce's statement, there are some like overarching themes that are concerning to development community, but they're also very minute, not minute, but there are details in the actual language of the ordinance that I think are going to cause problems when it comes to parish government enforcing them, because I think they do look more so on the individual lot opposed to master plan development. Like for instance, you talked about how flat things were. Well, if we can't put more than 6 inches of fill under a driveway, then how are we going to get a site to drain? How are we going to be able, I mean, we want our drainage to work with gravity. Like we can't design ponds that work if we can't have more than 6 inches of fill. These areas that, the same council meeting talking about the mosquito abatement, and now they're trying to figure out, and the issue is the decentralized sewer. Well then, we're trying to make a point like, hey, we kind of need density to help create centralized utilities to help combat some of these issues, so some of these unsewered areas have an easier way to connect. And so I kind of, to Bruce's point, I kind of feel like there's some conflicting, like between the housing study and this, and I feel like there's some conflicting initiatives. But if we want to get into very exact language, I'll happily sit with you and Evelyn on like, hey, I think this specific phrase is an issue and this is an issue, and I have them all written down, but if I don't know if this is the environment that you want to go through that in or not. So I know, but just questions like, how are we going to enforce this line of the ordinance? How are we going to enforce this line of the ordinance?
Yeah, and I will say we met with parish staff, so Daniel, Ted, Aaron, and the folks that review engineered plans and worked on all of the language with them to make sure that it was able to be enforced. And so I don't know, Ted, if you want to speak to this, or, I'm, as a certified planner, I think it's different. Our job is, it's to protect the public's interest. Like, I'm not selling a house. And so I think there isn't confusion on our end in terms of what the goal of the study is, right? It's looking to the future, and it's asking what kind of building stock works. And I think, speaking to master plan developments, that really is about a development meeting about a particular master plan. Our scope of work isn't including helping you develop a master plan community in relation to these standards. Like, I think if you want to bring us an option and say, like, does this work, or how would I work with this? I think it's a meeting with Daniel. I think the standards are intentional in that if you're going to build a master plan community and bring in fill, then the likelihood of it flooding your neighbors is high, right? And so the conclusions are.
I guess that's just really hard to hear as an engineer who makes their living, who we have liability, and like we're not. That kind of stings a little bit. So because like there's stuff in this says for driveways must not exceed 6 inches above natural ground elevation except for where fill is part of foundation for the main residence, carport, or garage. If it's a master plan commercial development, how are they supposed to enforce something like that? So that's what's confusing. So, but even back it up, because there is another part of the ordinance that talks about if there is an approved development plan by Department of Engineering. So what basis are they approving it on? By meeting the other standards of the 25% reduction on 100-year and the floodplain mitigation and all the stuff that we already have? Is that what we need to present as a development plan, and then that gets us out of the res overlay? And that's a Department of Engineering decision?
Okay. You're asking a ton of questions all at once, but let me answer at least a few of them.
All right.
Just because there's a lot in that question. All right, so I think you asked a question about how does enforcement work for this? I did want to just be clear, a lot of the standards in the resilience districts are already standards in critical drainage areas or areas of special concern. They clearly are already being enforced, is my point. So they are capable of being enforced because they already are. Beyond, okay, what are your other questions? I'm trying to think.
So,
Can we stick with that? Can I ask you a question on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're saying it's being enforced. So some of these areas, let's say in Res 2, that are not in critical drainage and not in a floodplain. So you're saying it's already being enforced. We have to bring in 3 feet of fill, of freeboard. So that's actually not the case now. So how is it already being enforced in those areas?
That's not her question. Yeah.
I think what you're saying is the construction requirements are already being enforced in areas of special concern and critical and sensitive drainage areas, and Teddy can give you those requirements if y'all want to hear specifically what they are. It's been going on for a long time. We have a substantial amount.
But I'm talking about Res 2, right? Res 2, where you're not in a critical drainage and not in a
What I'm saying
floodplain.
is to
Well,
be
I'm just
clear.
asking the question, how does that apply?
What I'm saying is the regulations as they apply to fill being applied on a site are already in effect in many places in the parish in an area of special concern or a critical drainage area. What I'm saying is, by understanding that, you understand that fill regulations can be applied because the parish has done it successfully.
No, I think I understand that. I'm just asking
That
how
was
it
her question.
apply. But I'm asking, how does it apply in the areas that are not in special concern, where you're saying it already?
Okay, so one other question I'm hearing that we do need to clarify is how are the regulations being applied in a overlay zoning district, Res 1 or Res 2 hypothetically, when those same regulations were not already applied in a critical drainage area of area of special concern? A zoning overlay district is different from a critical drainage area or area of special concern. So I think that's the answer to that part of the question.
Because y'all's point has been, well, prove to us it doesn't exist there. And so on 3AI, it says that the placement of fill material shall be permitted only by a development plan has been submitted and approved by Department of Engineering. So where are they reviewing it based off of? The criteria that's already been established and that's being implemented today, the 25% reduction 100-year storm, the floodplain mitigation,
Right, you're right.
Okay.
That's another part of your question. So submit a drainage plan does not mean that you rezone a property. That's why there's a distinction between a zoning overlay versus something like my engineering study says this, yours says this, right?
Yeah.
That's not the same thing as a zoning overlay district, and it's for a reason, right? Like Alex said, the reason why you use overlays is to protect everyone, not just to go back and forth on whether one particular site can drain the rain that falls on it, right? It's so that collectively you have protection.
But this is just forcing that argument to be made sooner in the development. So we had to go, if we have engineering evidence, then we had to go for a rezoning to remove it from the overlay?
So like, I think the key here is that there's evidence that this is an issue. There's community support that this is a strong issue. And like, to do nothing puts the parish in a position of not being able to do anything, right? So if it isn't able to be engineered and someone brings in a proposal for fill, their hands are tied. They've got to review it. They've got to approve it, because there's nothing in place to stop and question it on a parcel by parcel basis. What the overlay does, and just like any zoning district does, it says this is what we want as a community in our future development patterns. We want buildings that are elevated. We want less fill. We don't want to flood our neighbors, right? So it's promoting a land development pattern because it's doing it proactively. I think we're not saying prove to us it doesn't work. We're saying we know this is a problem. We're getting ahead of it. If you find that you have a site that you think shouldn't be in the area, we're 100%, and our door has always been open to look at the site again with y'all, with any new engineering data, and potentially take it out of it, right? And so I think, but you have to see that this is intentionally proactive, just like any zoning district, right? When you're like, this is what we want to see happen in this area, the community has come out and said, this is what kind of land development we want to see in the area. And so it's not really, I know we're not trying to offend any builder, but it's more than engineering here, right? It's a community and how it continues to grow.
It's just one of those things, like, there were just 3 example developments that are flashed up there, and I would venture to say that at least one of those has a pretty comprehensive drainage study that was done, but yet saying that it can be developed in a feasible way that makes sense, that has now, but now it's in the res overlay.
So what you're bringing up is a broad point that does come into play with this study. And I'm not an engineer. I am not professing to be an engineer. No one that's not an engineer is professing to be an engineer. But you are bringing up the question, if you have, for example, an engineering plan for a given site, should that be data that would take that site out of, one of the overlays? The overlays were based, like we said, on those 4 factors. If the design team, the parish, I don't want to speak for the parish, we are just a consultant team. If the team has data that is otherwise from what is already shown in the data set, of course the team would consider that data. That's what Alex was just saying. Yeah. But keep in mind, as a community, there is a big difference. And I would love to hear from the engineers here too, to see what y'all have to say about this. There's a big difference between the drainage plan for one site or an engineering plan for one neighborhood versus, for example, your flood insurance study for the entire unincorporated St. Tammany Parish. They are different premises. They are considering different weather events. And there are things that happen outside the boundary of your one area that you might be building on that still do impact your neighbors.
Yeah. And as an engineer, I would say that is our responsibility to, not saying all of them do this, but should we do this? When you look at you're doing your drainage study, you zoom out and say, okay, the LiDAR that you just showed, what is flowing through my property? What is getting to my property? How do I convey this? How do I store it? Because we don't want the insurance claim. I mean, our liability is going to be attacked. So we do look at a global effect whenever we're designing, even if a site is only 5 acres. I mean, there's a project that we have that I want to say maybe it's about 150 acres, but the drainage basin we have to consider is 1,000. Holy freaking cow. You know what we did? We designed it to not impact the neighbors. So I understand your point, but that's just not how we actually do things.
what design storm are y'all using to build to?
100-year.
Yeah.
So like even had developments where we looked at beyond that because of community concern.
And this is what we're getting at. Not every designer builds to the 100-year, but we're seeing our August 2016 floods. Those were 500-year rain events where everybody flooded, right? Y'all heard from neighbors where they flooded 7 times now since 1995. You know, the Atlas data, rainfall rates, storm data, it's all historical based on data that's old, right? To their points, all this data is being updated, and this study is intentionally proactive. It's looking forward, it's using CPRA, 550-year projections of flood risk. It's not relying on historic special flood hazard area maps from FEMA because those are super old and outdated. And so what I'm getting at is I understand that, and we respect y'all's expertise and what you're planning for, what you're asked to design for. And what we're saying is there's also lived experiences that are much more severe events. And we know collectively, and I've worked with a lot of engineers, we're doing Region 6 watershed model, watershed plan, which includes 19 parishes. We work across all the engineers. A finding that we have in all of our studies is that all of our infrastructure is under-engineered, right? It's just we haven't caught up with the rate of rainfall. So I hear what you're saying fully, and I respect it. But I also know that when you're thinking about the future, you have to acknowledge that there's limitations in how we engineer stuff today and to what standard. And, you know, if you look at this area, I think more caution is warranted, and that's what we were really hearing from the community.
Yeah, and engineering staff, when they review stuff, we've gotten those comments, hey, please show, like, we need to understand off-site patterns. And that's a comment that they look at and they enforce today. So, but anyway, but kind of going back to my other question, so then if we get engineering back up, Department of Engineering agrees, hey, y'all provide sufficient evidence. Is it really a rezoning that gets us, do we have to go through a rezoning process in order to get us out of the overlay? Yes? Yes.
Okay, I have a couple questions. One, just to make sure we are at least on the same page and you understand, I mean, the problem with flooding, particularly in these areas, is very real and very consistent. We've had 2 or 3 events just during this council term where we've had several cases of homes flooding. So none of this is being done just to create any kind of issue for developers or for builders alike. We're trying to solve problems. And I also thought that was the main idea of this meeting, was to start to solve some of these problems. So I have a couple of questions that I think may require some potential exemptions. I don't know that these questions could be answered today, but if we could take them down and look at them, getting them answered maybe prior to the next meeting. I think there maybe should be a lot size of some significance that maybe should be exempt, whether it's a 2-acre or a 3-acre lot. I know I've had several constituents that called me that were very concerned about that are in CR2. When they want to build another home, or if their home is destroyed, they'd like to go back to a slab on grade house. I think there must be some size that would fit with that. I also think when you have a development that falls into CR2, maybe there should be a potential for more intense retention requirements and still allowing it to be slab on grade, or maybe if it is going to be an elevated construction, then allowing it to, the retention requirement should be less, possibly. I don't know if these things would work, but looking at the area and understanding, I thought that might be some viable options. And let's see if I had anything else. I think that's it for now. I think Martha had some questions as well.
Yes. Okay. I have Ted here. We've got Aaron. Seems like what I'm hearing is that our concerns, Alex, I'm simple, that these areas flood. We want to be able to develop in those areas safely. Why can we not, as a parish, increase in this particular, without having an overlay, but or ever how you would do it, this particular area to make the drainage required for a 500-year flood? Those kind of things that we know this is a critical area. We're concerned. We obviously realize that the 100-year flood, we're having more of those to implement through the drainage, that we would be able to do that. If that entails more detention ponds, larger lots, or whatever. That, but it just seems like we're doing this backwards because in my area, it's the mobile home overlay. Well, people have to come to us to request that overlay on a specific piece of property. That if we are looking at overlaying everything and then doing the reverse of it to see if this is allowed, I think for the builders and for the people that, I mean, even if you wanted to build single family, the ones that are not in a development, that again, it's just another step that they have to take and spend more money. The object in this is to be able to use this property and do it safely. So why can we not increase, Ted, whoever, the 500-year flood, you know, to build to that? Is that something y'all could do with this? Ted, you can come up. Sorry, put you on the spot. But this is what I'm hearing, and it might not be feasible, but to, you know, if our concerns is that the 100-year flood's not working, what do we do?
It's a tougher question to answer right off the cuff, but I will do my best for you. I think some other municipalities have attempted to do a 500-year storm reduction requirement, and what you really start to see, and granted this depends drastically on where you are, what the property is, how big of a lot you are, is some of it you can't physically design to where you make the property economical at all. Meaning 500-year takes in 60-65% of your actual usable land. To be able to meet a detention requirement of that standard, you're talking about detaining hurricanes or your most severe events, your most severe storms ever, which in theory sounds wonderful, but in practicality is very hard to do. If it was easy to do, it would have been a standard that's probably been implemented nationwide by this point in time. So that probably is not your best go-to as far as a design standard, or it's something we probably would have looked in when we were rewriting the UDC. Now, a thing that was discussed and things that can be discussed, or to Councilman Joe's point, is do you do certain different development styles and reduce reductions, or on the flip side of that, say in sensitive areas, instead of 25%, it's 25% with 6 inches of freeboard in your pond, or 30% because it's a sensitive area. That is something more realistic that still makes majority of the property
just increase it from what we're expecting them to do now.
That would be a more
builders, is that
method,
something that y'all have thought about, that we increase it for these particular areas that's been denoted to us, that you increase that from the 25% runoff to make it greater for that area? Is that something feasible?
Well, we suggested the UDC.
I don't know if that's a builder question, but it may be a developer question.
Whatever.
But look, we're working towards solutions. I mean, we worked together on the UDC and came up with a better product, and that's what we're asking here. Is to have a seat at the table and work together to make this a better product. Are we concerned? I mean, do I agree that this overlay should be in repetitive loss areas? Absolutely. Should it be in areas that flood? Absolutely. But one size doesn't fit all. And I just want to say this: if we're everything we've been called, if you pass this resiliency overlay as it was written without our involvement, Safe Haven, Pelican Park, God knows how many other properties would have been in this. Pelican Park, let's take that. You wouldn't be building the bypass road right now. So I think we bring value. We're not looking for a fight. We're looking for a better product. We want to work together, no different than we did with the UDC. And so that's all we're asking. So to your point, Martha, I think anything's possible. Yes, look, as developers, we have to reduce runoff, and we're fixing some of the sins of the past where there were no
we had no engineers
where there were no
or people
rules.
telling us,
So anything's possible, and that's a consideration. So I think that's
So what are
a
y'all
good point.
asking for today? When you say a seat at the table, can you clarify that on some of the issues that she was talking about?
Well, I think I stated it earlier. If it's not in a critical drainage area, if it's not in the floodplain, if it's not in a repetitive loss area, then these properties deserve consideration for development. Basically, you're taking them out of commerce.
Ted, I'm sorry. Sure.
You won't hear me ask that often, but so I think one thing that may be pertinent to at least discuss, because I was back there thinking about it, and it's an ordinance that you guys actually just saw these past 2 months come online, where for the first time we actually have a waiver clause governed by the Department of Engineering for your areas of special concern, whereas before it would just flat out come through and you would be removing parcels, lots, different pieces of properties from those areas. We had to add that ordinance because for that particular layer, and it's not truly a zoning overlay, but it is in fact an area of special concern. It's a mapped layer, right? But not a zoning classification.
Right.
We never had a waiver clause for that. And to exactly some of their points is not all property is created equal. And to the parish's point, we understand that as well. But for us to be able to evaluate the 19,000 acres of land that each individual property owner owns is not a possible ask. It just can't be. It's why we do overlays. It's why we do areas of special concerns. It's why we do moratoriums based on known beaten bounds, known platted references. It's something that we can take a chunk and start to look at. To say everything in that chunk is the same is not the statement we're making right now. And so what I'm getting at is it may be appropriate to look into, should there be exemptions? Should there be a waiver clause added to this overlay that was added to the area of special concern overlay, say overlay, you understand what I mean?
Same one, yeah.
That is not currently done, that says you meet certain criteria like we just added there. You will still stay in it because the whole thing here is we're not removing the overlay, but you will be built to a different engineered standard.
Okay.
That's something that really wasn't brought up, and I'm not knocking the consultants by any means. It's not something that was asked. It was something that says, here's your area, produce a standard to build to, and that's what they did. We're just like the UDC, and I'll pick on that document. How many times have you guys seen changes to the UDC text come through and come to you guys right now? The documents are intended to be good, but they are never, ever perfect the first go around. So there is always room for improvement, and I think your overlay and the study findings may be a situation for that, right? But I think maybe the questions are, how do we remove all of it? How to remove some of it? That really should be the question. The question should be, should we look at when these parcels do qualify and what are those qualifications? Should they be able to be built to a different standard? And I think that's a more appropriate question.
That is great input.
So,
Thank you, Ted.
let me ask you this too.
Of anything I heard.
Yes, this is.
Great job.
And this is what my point is that we have to be able, like you said, one size don't fit all. But Ted, I shouldn't, I'm not going to word it that way. Do you suggest, as a council, if we vote on this particular overlay, then would we do a work session, like you said, with the developers to see this criteria and this checklist that if they have this, this, and this, would we do this before we vote on this overlay, or instimate some things that we can do?
Be in there.
The ability, well, that's good. The ability that's our next step. We do the overlay, but with the no, council's saying never mind. No, it's got to be one thing. Okay, quick shake
I'm going to defer to somebody who knows a little bit more about the standards for the adoption
well,
right
that's
now.
my concerns.
But I'm
is
happy
that
to talk about modifications to the ordinance when they need to come online, which I think is exactly how we handled the UDC, the area of special concern. They've been implemented because the best thing to do is find real cases and say, hey, this is my property, that this is why I think it doesn't work. Okay. Right? Because right now, we're, to Councilman Joe's point, 2 acres, 3 acres, they sound good in theory, but is it the good practice? Where is this happening? Did we miss it? Should it be 1.5 acres or should it be 4? One of the best things about using the new UDC is we have developers in the community come to us and say, this is a product that I want to do, and this is how I don't understand how it fits in this new code. Let's work through it. And that's where you're seeing a lot of these UDC changes stem from, not because we got it wrong, but because this is the change that we didn't think about. This is how it works. So a lot of times I think you adopt something that your professionals put forward and say, this is a good practice, this is a good standard. And then you have a community that says, this is why this property doesn't work in it. This is something you should consider changing. I have 200 acres that has never flooded, but it's right dab in the middle of Res 2.
Right.
Bring me those things, and that's how you start to really understand what should be modified.
If Ted, just to catch you on that, aren't we working, and I don't know if we've incorporated Desireline, but I know Aaron, we're all working to, that's why I said when I volunteered for this is like, I told Ross, let me be the guinea pig from my district. Was we have Maison de Village was a subdivision that is trying to get themselves out of Coastal Resilience 1. And we're going through the process right now to meet as a team to see what we need to do to see if that could even be a possibility.
Exactly. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we had talked about repetitive loss and severe repetitive loss, and recently we had a conversation with some of the home builders. I had a meeting with them, and we talked about the fact that you could be designated as repetitive loss if you had multiple claims of $1,000 or more. And if I understood correctly, that could include just AC units. So do we have a lot of homes that are designated as repetitive loss where the home itself never did take on water? And if we do, how many?
That is something I do not know the answer to on that number. I can try to work with some of maybe the consultants do, but I know Ms. Diet in the planning office does a lot with our FEMA.
I would love to have that information.
If we have it, I will happily work with her to get it to you. I don't know if it's split out like that. You know what I'm saying? Is a claim, is it just exterior claim or interior claim? I don't know how the FEMA breaks those down.
I think it would be really important to us to know how many homes are actually taken in water.
If that's available, I will work with her to get that for you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I just have one last request. So we've worked, and again, y'all know I'm a civil engineer. We've had developers spend a lot of money on us to prove no impact to development, and then we come to meetings and we have a whole room full of people, and they essentially tell us, hey, you engineer with decades of experience, you don't know what you're talking about. And then we get denied. So if I'm just asking if this is the route we're going, and this really is it's a planning initiative, but this has some really heavy engineering components to it, that we ask that you guys back us up and that we know what we're talking about here. Because, I mean, y'all asking us to prove it, we're gonna put evidence to prove it, and then we're still gonna get denied, and that's just not fair to us, and it's not fair to them either.
I think that's a good point. I think we've also had the opposite of that, though. I'm not going to mention names, but I know it's existed several times. But something else, Ted, to your point, you know, sometimes we may have substantial drainage projects that create major improvements that may totally change the makeup of an area. And then at the same time, so that may require, so now the area's had substantial improvements, we've added retention, we've kind of gone back and retrofitted an existing recorded lot subdivision with drainage. Maybe now it would not need to be in Coastal Resilience 2. So under what you proposed, that would give the option to look at that in the future, which I like. But I do think we know one of the biggest problems that we've had certainly in District 7 is the recorded lots where there's zero drainage infrastructure. You have constant slab on grade homes, especially on 50-foot lots, and we have constant flooding in those areas. So I think, and you all correct me if I'm wrong, we're on the same page when that falls under this overlay, that those construction requirements should be met. Is that?
That's your pleasure.
Oh, go ahead.
I agree with what you just stated, Mr. Chairman, for sure. I think that there are certain areas in the community that have repetitive flood loss. I think, Ms. Council Lady, the repetitive loss map is extremely compelling. It doesn't say whether house or AC, but if you just look at the map, it's very concentrated in areas of large tributaries to the lake where you get coastal surges. It's much less than from Mandeville to Slidell to I-12. So, and I have that map. I'd be happy to share it with you. Yes, sir. We have that, and we provide that very early on, some of our data to try to be heard, if you will. So I think something that would also be helpful, and we may not have time today, but I would ask for you all to sit with the consultant or the council person who championed District 11 specifically, because that is law as we sit here today. So there's a lot of contemplation about what we should do with the overlay. District 11 was overlaid last week. So I would like to hear an explanation as to why some areas are white and why they're pink. And what you'll find is that you're going to find them kind of digress into zoning sort of talk and about, well, this project was planned there, and there's 18 projects that are slated, there's large undeveloped tracts, and it's going to be difficult to say because that land's lower than this land, or that land, I don't even know. I know the land. You know, that's what we study every day, to Liz's point. And there are tracts that are adjacent to projects that I know what people are working on to bring to commerce. The adjacent tract that no one's working on, suppose, is not overlaid, and the project areas are overlaid. So I would, just another very broad stroke, and forgive us for being into the details, but we are into the details, technical details. And I want y'all to know that y'all have one of the best consultants in the whole state up here operating in Duplantis Design Group. Whether you're in Thibodaux, whether you're in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, they are the top. So they certainly deserve a voice. But what you'll find is that when you get into the zoning, what I would caution you is I believe there are concerns about zoning without, you're zoning property to a lesser density without proper land notices to the landowners. And it's spoken in here pretty loosely about, well, we need less density, that, and the community agrees that, you know, development is too much, or whatever those sentiments are, and that, we understand those sentiments, trust me, we all live here, right? But I would caution you to that. I think that just dropping spot zoning in, which is essentially what it is, I don't know, it's just not good, you know? So I would challenge you to look at it from that perspective, you know? And the other thing I'll offer is your UDC is the top of the top. I work in Baton Rouge, I work in Jefferson Parish, I work in Livingston, St. Tangi. Everybody talks about how hard the UDC is to meet here. And we're not here to complain about the UDC. We're here to complain about these layers that continue. We've been shut down for 4 years, waiting on the UDC to get refined, happily, no problem. We all worked together. We figured out retention, detention, whatever we wanted to put into the ordinance. Everybody worked really hard on that. And in this instance, when we're starting to walk these overlays back across the parish, you're really undoing all of that work because you can't comply with both. I'm here to tell you, you can't comply with both. You can't retain your water and not fill more than 6 inches. It's just, you can't do it. You couldn't do it on top of a hill in this town. So I would just challenge you to sort of consider, you know, it becomes, if you get into the details, and one of the reasons, frankly, why, you know, the consultant doesn't want to get into a lot of questions and details is because the engineering behind this study and the engineering requirements that it speaks to, like no net fill, is a very specific term, right? Wetlands is a very specific term, as this gentleman said earlier. And there's so much of that in there that I guess I would tell you that, you know, there is another side of professionals in this parish that live here, operate here every day, and we have the same sentiments that your consultants that are working with you on a planning side have. And they understand the land, and generally good projects deserve to be approved. You know, it's that simple. And I'm not saying every project's a good project. Every piece of land's not a good piece of land. But we do understand good projects, and we certainly understand land. So thank you for your time, and this is very productive to have this opportunity to address you as a council. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm ready.
I want to say one other thing, and some of y'all attended the Business Council's meeting last week. We had Secretary of LED, Susan Bonet-Bourgeois, and Richard Nelson, Secretary of Commerce. In Secretary Bourgeois' presentation, there's $200 billion worth of projects in Louisiana. And I can't even tell you how many jobs that creates. $200 billion in projects. And so I asked the question because the Business Council represents Tangipahoa, Washington, and St. Tammany Parish. And I asked her how much of that is coming to this area, and if it isn't coming, why not? And her answer was pretty pointed. It's because how difficult it is to develop in these areas. We have made it that way. And as a result, all these opportunities are looking elsewhere. So I would just ask you to consider that in this discussion and going forward. Thank you.
Just a few comments. My name's Paul Reese, and I have my main concern, and we have tried to schedule meetings, and we're going to have meetings with Alex and the staff. I feel that you know, we have here 2 resiliency overlay areas. I really feel we need 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. These areas are so different. The areas north of the bypass road are 20, 30 feet above sea level. They don't flood. They've never flooded. Okay? They contribute to possible downstream flooding. But the one size fits all is just, I think, completely out of line. I think it's skewing the results towards an unworkable situation. I do like the situation where the ordinance itself has either an express ability to get a waiver from any overlay that may be imposed. So I think that's, as a minimum, a good feature should something be adopted. Another thing I'm hearing, and probably just for the first time realizing tonight, is that there is some rezoning effort as part of this. And I saw one of the maps that they had put up showing these vast areas of L1 possibly being rezoned to estate 7-acre lots. Well, if you do that rezoning, you don't need to do this overlay. You're going to have 100 houses over 10,000 acres. There's not going to be anything going in. I think Bruce's comment about the bypass road is also on point. This is intended to help grow this area of St. Tammany and to take some of the pressure off of Mandeville. And that's what the bypass road is going to do. But by rezoning all of this, you're really undoing all of that economic development potential. So I think that the rezoning, going to 7-acre lots in this area, is, you know, I think that's way overreach. I think that is going to be a detriment to any type of economic activity in that area. And most developers will never even touch that for a 7-acre lot. So I think that the rezoning attempt, I think, should be separated. And, you know, this area is growing and it's changing. In fact, this whole study doesn't even mention the bypass road. Yet it was being built and planned all alongside. So I don't understand the future of the bypass road. Why isn't that part of this study? I think another thing that was important, and I really appreciate Daniel's comments on the engineering, and Alex, their comments that they're not engineers. There has been no engineering studies whatsoever in all of this. And I don't think that it's fair to landowners to say, well, you didn't come in this 3 or 4 month period and sit down with Desireline to see if your property could get out of this overlay. I mean, to me, this is something, I mean, we give more period of time to go talk to the assessor about your property tax. You know, there's public hearings and ability to sit down and talk with them. I think that, a minimum of 6-month period to alert people to know that what's being done is going to affect their property, is a minimum. And there's not a lot of landowners. You might have in this whole swath of 20, 30,000 acres, probably 50 to maybe a couple hundred landowners. And it would be an easy gesture by this council to say, before we do this, here's an opportunity to come sit down. This is such a drastic change. And, from the UDC, we thought we were done. We thought we had accomplished so much.
But can I tell you, though, that's exactly what this is. And the first meeting had several more landowners, or at least representatives of landowners, but that's exactly what this is about.
Well, I think there's a lot of people that really don't know that there's not been publicity about this at the grassroots level. So it's certainly my biggest issue. I think we're willing to look at how to properly address flood issues and retention issues. The rezoning, I think, is the biggest issue that we have, that we would have problems with going forward.
If I may, I'd like to address a couple of comments. Number one, the assessor gives you 2 weeks. All right, and Alex, if you wouldn't mind, could you put the list of all the meetings we've had?
Excuse me. Just gotta
No.
Yeah.
I think it's got to be right.
Yeah. I mean, we've had countless meetings, and in my district, I have a standing monthly meeting that meets like clockwork that's gone over this at the grassroots level. So for this, for the District 11. Oh, I do want to know, I just got a heads up from Kevin Davis, be really careful on I-12 when you go home. There's troopers everywhere, so don't go fast. And the other thing, too, is I've also reached out to the home builders and to the NBC. I need help with my District 59, my Highway 59 moratorium that I inherited from Reichert. I've contacted both the NBC and the home builders, and I was just responded with a list of people who were mad at me about coastal resilience. So all that being said, I do need help because I inherited a moratorium when they stretched my district from Slida all the way up to here to try to figure out what's going on. So I would like some input from the home builders and from the NBC, please. So we've met a bunch of times on this. This has been in the ether since early 2024. And the other thing I need to remind y'all is we're still functionally a brand new council. The UDC rewrite was the function of the previous council. It was laid out on our laps at our feet for January of our first meeting that we met as the new council. So the UDC is really, that's owned by the previous council. That's their creation and their work. So we do appreciate that that's a huge change, but for 10 of us, we're new to this council. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to be respectful of y'all's time, but I do feel like I do stand by the statement about there being errors. And I think there were errors in things that were discussed tonight, and I'll follow up with y'all out of respect for your time in terms of some statements that were made about the study, the extent, spot zoning. There's so many that I respect these gentlemen, but I do also feel a sense of, ownership over the work that we did and the thoroughness of the research and the analysis. Keep in mind that roads are not part of the resilience overlay. They're mapped to the parcel, so any road project is not impacted by the resilience overlay. And I do want to just kind of at a high level, but also detail oriented, there was mention of this 500-year standard, right? And I think the idea that you want to prepare for a 500-year flood is really great. That's what residents think you're preparing for when they buy a house, right? They think they're protected. And I think what you heard from Ted was that, it's impossible to plan for this area that way because we know these areas flood. And so the solutions that we're offering are actually pretty specific, right? Because we acknowledge that there's a gap, and that is elevate, right? So when the water comes, you're higher, right? and that you don't want to bring in fill because moving a little bit of dirt is very likely going to impact your neighbor because of how flat it is. And I know I keep repeating that, but that is the core truth associated with these recommendations. I think we're more than happy to work with Ted and the parish on a waiver. We did actually talk about a waiver early on, and it was discussed, and we were concerned, and so was the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission did not like the idea of a waiver. They didn't want to not know how the zoning district was going to be interpreted. You know, they wanted it to be as straightforward as possible, and they were concerned that the administration would be flooded with requests for waivers that would sort of undermine the utility of this is a yes or no binary question, which is more easier to administer. So I just want to be clear. We did talk about it. We talked about different size lots, but I think at this juncture, we're totally willing to work with solutions, and we want to work with the council. Our door has been open. I came to this meeting, and I know Evelyn did too, with a willingness to work, you know, and I do feel like we keep getting sort of questioned over the integrity of the report and the integrity of the outreach and the integrity of the analysis and the data that we're using, but we do still we're still waiting for a site, you know, we're still waiting for a location, we're still waiting for information to look at. So ultimately, we are here in earnest and really want to make this work to the betterment of the citizens who live there now and who are interested in moving there. And I think that's really the goal. They're not here tonight, right, or today. Like, this is a working meeting with builders, and I just want to make sure that their voice is heard throughout this process, and that's our goal. Our goal is to really plan for the community and think about what we can do proactively that's both forward-looking, that addresses the flood risk profile of this area, but that is also able to be administered fairly, you know, with the administration on a case-by-case basis. So I appreciate y'all listening today, and I won't take up more of your time, but y'all know, we work with y'all a lot, and so there's lots of respect across the aisle.
Thank you. All right. One more?
And I would be remiss if I didn't stand here for the Home Builders Association. I just want to say, and to answer your question, Arthur, is our developers that are members of our association are the tip of the spear. And as home builders, we need lots to build on. So our hierarchy, if you will, starts with our developers, and the developers spend hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars in what they do very well. Our developers have the best engineers in our region that's working with them to bring projects to you and to this parish that are viable and that are sustainable. And so we ask that you keep our developers in the loop, keep our developers in the conversation. They can help you with Highway 59. Probably more than any outside influence. They won't cost you a dime. They're willing. They have the expertise. And one last thing is, and we continue to say that, even going back way beyond the beginning of 24, is that while we were working on the UDC rewrite for several years, we believe that is the platform, that is the Bible that we can depend on. And if we have to make amendments to it, as we're doing, moving forward, then so be it. But let that be the standard instead of adding more layers to something that has even been said here today, that it works, and it works well, and it will continue to work because it is a living document that will take us positively into the future. So work with our developers. They've got the best engineers on the planet, and we will make this work for all of us. Thank you.
I think we're going to wrap it up, but we do have a lot of questions. I think the next meeting, since it's not a presentation, we can go back to a regular, smaller format. Okay? And we'll go over the waiver program that we discussed, and I know there was a number of other items came up. so we can start to try to get this thing to evolve and get it to a product that's workable for everybody and benefits the parish. Sounds good? Thank you all.